I'm speaking in good faith today with Rabbi Evan Moffic, and you're coming to me, I believe, from Chicago, which is your home.
Yes, sir. And it's sunny and relatively warm today, which is a blessing in March.
Very nice. Rabbi Moffic shares Jewish wisdom, stories, and inspiration with people of all faiths. He's a graduate of Stanford University and leads a congregation in the Chicago suburbs and teaches across the world. I'm just going to mention now, this will be in the show notes as well, Rabbi, that people can go to rabbi.substack.com and be able to see your different publications, including the reason that we got in touch with you, which is a wonderful book called What Every Christian Needs to Know about Passover.
Yeah.
So that leads me to two questions right off. Were you raised in a religious home? And then what made you decide that you needed to reach out to other faiths and do some explanation and create understanding?
Yeah, I was raised in a Jewish home, and my parents, my whole family was active in the synagogue. In fact, I went to a Jewish day school, which was not very common at the time because I'm a Reform rabbi, so that's the more liberal branch of Judaism, and not many Reform Jewish kids go to day school. But it
Mm.
happened to be a great school that was in our neighborhood, and it was wonderful. So I learned Hebrew as a kid. I was involved in the synagogue as a kid, and that kind of set the path. I mean, I didn't know I was going to become a rabbi, but after rabbinical school, after completing rabbinical school, I was at a synagogue in downtown Chicago, and we were 2 blocks from a very large, very active Presbyterian church. And we did a lot of programs with them together. And it just resonated. They asked me to teach a class, and the class became very popular. And so I taught another class. And then we decided to have an interfaith Seder. Because
Mm.
Passover has always been a meal where you would invite people of different faiths. It's a part of the Christian story too. I mean, the Exodus from Egypt is part of the Bible, and so that kind of opened the door to really this passion that I was really able to develop. And being in an urban area with lots of different faiths, I think helped cultivate that. The fact that many Jews marry people of different religions. And so that actually, as I was performing weddings, I would interact with both members of and ministers of people of other faiths. And there was just a great openness. And in fact, right now we see rising anti-Semitism in the world. These relationships that I've built with other clergy and people of other religions are, I think, really helpful. They set a tone for real civil and meaningful conversation.
Yeah. Do you feel support from those other congregations
Yes,
as far as anti-Semitism when it happens?
yes, very much so. I mean, not everybody, and there are certainly political tensions come in often, and I try to shy away from those as much as I can, and focus on the ties that bind us. But yes, I mean, since October 7th and what happened, I many friends reached out to me, and I was very touched by it.
Well, I have heard that there is a role for the youngest child at the table for Passover. Do you remember being that child? What I'm really looking back is earliest Passover memories, and how was that meaningful to you?
Yeah, I have two kind of early. One of them, I'm not sure if it's my memory or my mom's, telling me the story, but this was obviously before cell phones, and I was the youngest child, and we were at the rabbi's house for Passover, and I was the youngest, so I had to ask the four questions. And my mom claims that she plugged in a tape recorder so that I could listen while chanting the four questions at the rabbi's house. Today I would have just pulled out a phone and gone along with that. So that's one. And the second memory, and this I actually do remember, I know I remember it, is at some friend's house who were Orthodox. They were much stricter. And in Orthodoxy, the Seder is supposed to go until at least midnight. And
Mm.
I was a young kid. So I remember putting my head down and falling asleep at the table multiple times as the evening went on and on and on. So I do, and those are my youngest. Those are my most treasured memories.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if, before we talk in depth about Passover, if you could talk to me about belief in a higher power or a connection to the concept of God. Was there some point at which you had to translate what you'd been taught, what you'd learned, both synagogue and the day school, and decide, am I a believer, or what is my relation to God and the divine?
Yeah. I mean, I'm an intellectual guy. I love reading theology. I love reading modern Jewish history and thought. But I've always had a kind of basic faith. I
Hmm.
think just I've always felt a kind of majesty and awe when I go into a synagogue. I feel a connection to other people, to something bigger than ourselves. It's almost just an awareness, a feeling that we're here for a purpose. And I never really worked on it in terms of developing my own theology. I mean, I've talked about things that I believe and question and so forth, but on the deepest level, I think it's just always been there from childhood, and I think that is, I almost think you have to have that if you're going to be a faith leader. Now, some people would disagree. I know some rabbis who really have a much more kind of rationalist, non-theistic notion of God, but that's never been me. Um,
Hmm.
it's something I'm happy to talk about and appreciate, but I think it just came growing up and from my parents. They've always had a deep sense of faith, so I think I inherited some of that.
Well, I'm wondering then if you can talk about this topic of your book, what every Christian needs to know about Passover. What do you find when you're speaking to, you've been invited to a Christian congregation? What is really useful for you to share?
I think the most useful things that I've shared are the Jewish interpretations of the different symbols. And that's throughout my books, is that there is a whole one of the beautiful things about Judaism is that it is never a literalist religion. Even the Orthodox, there's always commentary, there's always interpretation, because the underlying idea is that God gave us this text to speak to us in our time and place. And the text has so many meanings. And when we discover a new meaning, we're simply uncovering what God had intended all along.
Hmm.
So, for example, the matzah, the unleavened bread, seeing that as a sign of humility, that the bread is unleavened. It didn't have time to rise. It didn't have time to puff up like we puff up our egos. And part of the purpose of Passover is to cultivate that humility before God, just like Moses, who was the most humble man on earth. Another interpretation is the Hebrew word Mitzrayim. That means Egypt in Hebrew. But if you divide, if you the root of Mitzrayim is the word tsar, which means narrow. And so the journey from Egypt is the journey out of narrow places in our mind, narrow places in our soul, narrow places in our world. So that it deepens the experience, that it's not just about going through the motions of reading these prayers and eating these foods. It's actually a spiritual journey, and that's captured in the language itself. And these commentaries are ways of deepening the meaning of the text. In fact, one year I spoke about Passover. I can't remember. Yeah, we did a mini Seder for people in AA who were dealing with
Interesting.
addiction,
Hmm.
and that leaving the narrow places was something that I think resonated deeply. So it just shows how these religious ideas can be applied to so much.
Oh, beautifully stated. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. I'm wondering, uh, you mentioned a Seder that you did
Mhm.
for a group. So you're not just explaining the meaning and the symbolism, but actually, in some ways, reenacting. How do you feel about various groups, which could include Christians, having something like a Passover Seder? Is it disrespectful, or is presenting the elements and talking about them? What should we be aware of so we're not, I guess the word we use today is culturally appropriating, but that we're not trying to enact a ceremony that's not ours?
Yeah, this is a very controversial issue, and it actually I had some pushback uh, against me when the book came out, because the truth is, I think it's okay. There are many
Hmm.
rabbis who don't think it's okay, but I think it's okay with the proper guidance. I don't want, a somebody just looking up Passover on Wikipedia and printing it out and saying, this is what we're supposed to do. That I think is too simplistic.
Yeah.
But the Passover story, is part of the Christian Bible as well. It's part of the entire. So I think it's okay. And I think it's okay to add different meanings to it. To me, um, cultural appropriation would be pretending that it's not a Jewish ritual, or saying our Seder supersedes the Jewish Seder. As
Oh,
but that's not what I've seen Christian Passover Seders do. I've seen them mostly because I've participated in them. I've helped them at Catholic churches, at Protestant churches. I see just a deep appreciation. I want to experience the Jewish Passover and do it in a Christian setting. And to me, that's okay. Um, so the book actually at the very end has a kind of template for a Passover Seder for a church. Again, that got me a little criticism. In fact, it was interesting. I actually debated a couple of more conservative rabbis about this. But uh, the other way I look at it is, this is going to happen anyways. Might as well have an educated approach to it. So that's one of the reasons I
interesting.
provided that Seder, so that people who are doing it don't just print off something they find on a random website, that they have
Yeah.
something that is sort of rooted in Jewish tradition.
And I'm wondering, for people who might not know, Passover is a meal. Could you talk about some of the things that would be on the table, the foods, and some of the symbolism?
Yeah, it's a very ritualized meal, and the symbolism is meant to um, remember the Exodus from Egypt. So the primary symbol is matzah, which is just unleavened bread. It's crunchy bread. And the idea is that the Jewish people had to flee Egypt so quickly before Pharaoh changed his mind, which he did change his mind. They were right to be suspicious of it, that they didn't have time to let their bread rise. So they had to take the bread before it could rise, and it was crunchy. So that's to remember the haste with which we left Egypt. Then there's the bitter herbs, which is, it's called maror. It's horseradish, and that's to remember the bitterness of slavery. Then
Hmm.
it's called, or there's a shank bone. You don't eat that, but it's on the Seder plate, and that's to remember the Passover lamb, because before it was a ritualized, well, before the temple was destroyed in 70 CE, the ritualized meal was a lamb, a paschal lamb. And so now the temple's gone, so we don't eat a paschal lamb, but the shank bone is a memory of that. It's a symbol of that. You have the egg, or a hard-boiled egg typically, which symbolizes springtime. Passover is a time of renewal. You have salt water, which are the tears of slavery. You have parsley, which is springtime, again, because Passover tends to happen in the spring. I miss, oh, um, Charoset, which is a mix of nuts and apples, and there you can add in different things. But that's the mortar that was
Mm.
used, that the Israelites um, had in their hands to make bricks of slavery. So those are all. And then then there are other foods that we eat, that are sort of the substance of the meal. You have gefilte fish, that's just a custom. That's a Jewish tradition. Um, Oftentimes people have brisket, but the underlying, probably the most important thing to remember about the food is, you don't have any bread. You don't have any bread products. Just, well, leavened bread. You don't have any of that for a week. So you don't have like Cheerios. You don't have certain things. Um, that's sort of the way of infusing this memory of the Exodus into our hearts.
So I have a Jewish friend in Israel, who near Jerusalem, who always says to me, "And don't forget the cups of wine."
Yes,
So
yes, very true.
I
Four
should
cups
ask
of wine.
you, okay, and what are they for? What's their purpose?
Well, for the four promises of redemption. So the number four is really significant in Passover overall. There are 400 years of slavery, 4 times redemption is promised in Exodus. Um, 4 children, the 4 questions. So you also have 4 cups of wine. And wine, yeah, I mean, wine symbolizes sweetness in Judaism.
Mm.
It also symbolizes holiness. That, you know, in the ancient Near East, there were many religions that used wine for sacramental purposes, but you know, it was kind of associated with idolatry. And so Judaism took wine, this symbol of idolatry, but made it a symbol of holiness. And so wine is consumed on special occasions to mark the holiness of this day. Just like a little bit of wine is consumed on the Sabbath to mark the Sabbath, wine is consumed on Passover to mark the holiness of this day.
I'm wondering of all those symbols that you've just described to us, are there particular ones that maybe have always been most meaningful to you, or have there been times when one sort of stood out to you because of life circumstances and was really meaningful?
Hmm. I think, to me, the haroset has always been a wonderful symbol. I don't know. It's sweet. So maybe I just, as a kid, liked the sweetness of it. But it does, and the haroset and the egg, because I think they represent optimism and hope. And that, yes, we remember the bitterness of slavery, but the bitterness is always in the context of future joy. And there's a beautiful song that is sung at every Passover Seder called Dayenu. And that means it would have been enough. Die, the word die in Hebrew means enough. And Dayenu is we would have been satisfied. It would have been enough. We would have been happy. And it goes through all the things that God has done for the Jewish people. And after every one of them, it says, that would have been enough. But then, God, you did this. And that would have been enough. But then, God, you did this. So it's this beautiful prayer of gratitude. And at the end, there's kind of a messianic vision that in the end of days, you will bring redemption to the world. So it's a very forward-looking, even though the Passover Seder it's about memory, it's about remembering what happened. It's also very forward-looking and saying, because you delivered us back then, God, you will deliver us in the future. So to me, those forward-looking parts have always been very uplifting and inspiring.
Yeah, that makes sense. The
Yeah.
hope, gratitude, joy, beautiful words to grow out of a remembrance of difficult times.
Yes,
Do you happen to be a parent?
I do. 2
And
teenage girls. So
and how has raising children and involving them in Passover has that changed your perspective of the observance?
oh yeah, oh yeah. It's wonderful. It's great family time. We've always, we always have at least one set of parents, or grandparents, my parents or my wife's parents, who are in town. So it's great family bonding time. It's great to telling the story of Passover, and I like to tell them stories of Passover with, my grandparents, and my wife tells them stories with her grandparents, and they have fun cooking together if we cook. So it is. It's a really it's a wonderful holiday. It really builds memories. I mean, I've had so many interesting Passover seders in my life. Um, in different settings. When I was in college, when I was first became a rabbi, when I was a kid. It's some ways you can mark history by different Passover seders that I've experienced.
Interesting.
Yeah,
If I can quote you to you
yeah.
in your book, here's a little quote that through Passover, they seek to experience the blessing of freedom and not the pain of victimhood.
Mm, mm,
How would experiencing the blessing of freedom how would that apply today?
mm. I think it's gratitude. I mean, one of the great things about Passover is remembering that we live in a place of religious freedom. In America, we have a lot of problems right now. There's a lot of
Mm.
tensions and issues and conflicts, but truly, we are. we can practice our religion freely and be supported in it and find community. And when you sit around a Passover table, sometimes I think about times in Jewish history where Jews couldn't participate in Passover, when they
Mm.
had to do it in secret and couldn't invite Christian friends over. And so I think that to be in that place of freedom, to know that the future will be brighter. I mean, there's you traditionally end the Passover Seder as next year in Jerusalem. And so that's, yes, it is a literal hope that next year we can be in Jerusalem for Passover, but it's also symbolic that Jerusalem is the city of peace, the place of peace. May the world be more peaceful next year. May we be in a different space of more hope, more kindness, more love. That 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 sort of hope underlies the Seder, and that to me is what it means to be free, to not dwell on being victims, although Jews were victims, but to dwell, to hope, to yearn for that place of freedom.
You have an interesting invitation in the book, which was for people who aren't Jewish to explore the roots of their faith.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, I guess what comes to mind is perhaps Christians who spend a lot of time in the New Testament, but maybe not so much in the Old Testament. As people look towards those deeper roots, what do you think they'll find, or are you hoping they'll experience?
I think they'll find great meaning. I mean, I've spoken at probably by now hundreds of churches, and I think the underlying vision or goal is that people know Jesus was Jewish. And if you want to be close to Jesus and to know what Jesus experienced and when Jesus was on earth, know Judaism, know the religion that he was born into and that his community was part of and that his disciples belonged to. And so when you learn about Judaism, you can grow deeper, closer to Jesus and deeper in your own knowledge and faith. And so so that's part of it. The other part is just it's interesting. We live in a world where organized religion, faith is declining, and so when you can deepen your own sense of faith and just general knowledge of religious texts and stories, it's uplifting, it's inspiring. I mean, when I visit churches and I'll sit in on worship, I feel inspired, even though it's not my religion. I feel uplifted by hearing the letters of Paul or something else. So I think that's part of it. So it's the knowledge and the closeness, but it's also just the experience of learning from another person's faith. I mean, a lot of this stuff used to be taught in schools and public schools. It isn't anymore. So
Yeah.
this is another place where we can deepen our own sense of spirituality.
You can choose whether or not you can let me know if you have a response to this. But it seems to me that often when people are teaching something, they gain even more understanding.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that's how you know something is as you teach it or if you can teach it. Have you had a deepening of understanding of your own faith as you explain it to people of other faiths?
Yes. No, for sure. It really happened. I've written several books, and one of them was about the Jewish
Mm.
holidays for Christians. I think it's called What Every Christian Needs to Know About the Jewish Holidays. Didn't sell as well as some of the other books, but it was a lot of work. And I uncovered parts about the holidays that I had never really thought about. I'd experienced the holidays, but when I
Yeah.
really went into their history and their different practices, and there's even in the Passover book I talk about uh, Yemenite Passover practices where they dress in a certain way. I had never experienced any of this growing up, so in some ways the research and the teaching and the questions that I got from different people kind of pushed me to go deeper in my own faith, for sure. It's wonderful. It is. It's definitely, in some ways I compare it to, you know, uh, I meditate regularly, and that practice, that discipline, has deepened my own feeling in prayer as well, in traditional Jewish prayer. So I think that there is something when we go deep into a topic to teach it, that it opens up different parts for us.
What do you think gives you the most joy in your faith life?
Teaching, study and teaching, the two go together. I have a regular Bible study group. We call it Torah study at my synagogue. And it's just so nourishing. Every week we get together. Sometimes we'll go get through an entire chapter. Sometimes we only get through one verse, but we really go deep on the text. What does this mean? How does it resonate for you? How does this apply to your life? What are the different interpretations? Talking about all of that is deeply nourishing to me spiritually. And of course, I love prayer. I love song and music. That's all part of it. But I think what really touches my soul is deep study and transformation. Also, as a rabbi, in this when I get to experience life cycle events, conducting a funeral or a wedding
Mm.
or a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, that also just nourishes me spiritually.
You really get to be part of people's lives, important moments.
Yes, it's such a blessing.
So at what point did it occur to you first, maybe I'm going to be a rabbi, that this may be my path?
I think the thought first came to me when I became a bar mitzvah at age 13. And I really looked up to the rabbi and I thought he was just such a wonderful human being and leader. So I think it crossed my mind then, but I didn't pursue, I mean, it wasn't on the plan. It wasn't part of the future. I thought I'd go to law school or maybe, become a history professor. Um, but I had a couple of wonderful mentors in college, both professors who encouraged me to deepen Jewish study and rabbis who said, this could be something that you could do. And I had great rabbis growing up, so I really looked up to them. And I thought to myself, this could be a truly meaningful way of life. And then I saw that it combined everything I loved: study, teaching, community building, prayer, relationships. All of that could really find expression in the rabbinate. So I just kind of got lucky. I had wonderful mentors, and it was good teachers, and I had that self knowledge, and some people who want to go into become clergy or are discouraged by their parents. My parents were thrilled. They were very encouraging and loving about it. So it was just I think I was very fortunate.
That's nice. Do they happen to both be still with us?
Yes, yes, yeah. So they live in Milwaukee, whereas I'm in Chicago. So I don't see them all the time, but they come for events and holidays and things, which is wonderful.
Well, they must be very proud.
Thank you, thank you
And
very
of course, they've
much.
got granddaughters to come visit too. That's
Well,
enough.
that's the main draw for sure.
I'm wondering, we're speaking specifically of what Christians need to know about Passover. Is there something you wish people in general who may not be informed knew about Judaism?
Mm. Yes, I Judaism is not really a religion. It is a religion, but it's more than that. It's a people, it's a
Hmm.
community, it's a culture, it's a way of life. The category of religion versus secular doesn't really apply in Judaism. And I think that is a confusing, that's many Jews are confused about that too. But the if you go to Israel, for example, which I'm sure some of your listeners have, you see that about 75 to 80% of the population are not religious. They don't observe the Sabbath. They don't follow the dietary laws, but they consider themselves proudly Jewish. And it's because they're part of a people. And I think that is confusing sometimes to Christians.
Mm.
Um, and it affects how we look at the state of Israel today. So remembering that Judaism is as much a people as a religion is something I think some people just kind of intuit, they get it, but understanding it formally, I think can be very helpful to people.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
That people may be claim one or both of those heritages when they
Yes.
talk about being Jewish.
Yes.
Is there something I should ask you, but I don't know to ask? Or that when we're done, you'll think,
Yeah.
gosh, I wish we'd gotten to this or that
No,
other thing.
I've loved this conversation. I've loved your questions. It's truly a blessing for me to be able to get to speak with you and to meet your audience, and you know, teaching and speaking at churches and working with Christians has been such a blessing of my rabbinate, and or my ministry would be the Christian language for it. And I'm just grateful for this opportunity to talk with you.
Well, I confess to being jealous that you live in such a cosmopolitan place where there are people of all different faiths. As you mentioned, a few blocks from the synagogue is the Presbyterian Church.
Yeah.
And we have some of that, but not as much as I wish we had where I live. Just the variety of representing people and faiths from all around the world. I think it's beautiful that you're in a place like that and that you're taking advantage of that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Rabbi Evan Moffic, you can read about his books and his writings and be able to see him on video doing some of his teaching at rabbi.substack.com. Rabbi Evan Moffic, thank you for speaking with me today in good faith.
Thank you so much.